Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank all of you for your service, and I know how hard you're working to try to get this right. We have heard about the risk of unintended consequences. But here's the risk that concerns me, and I know you all feel the same. We have brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, husbands and wives. And when this happens, it is the risk of personal violation of somebody. It is the risk of destroying that person's internal soul, their emotional state, their physical state, and in some cases by a person who they look to, who is their leader, their commander, and that they look to with a sacred trust. General Amos, you put it best. You said, this is a sacred trust that we have in front of us, and that we have an obligation to get this right. And we're in this with you. When you said the buck stops here, the buck stops with us too. We have an obligation to get this right. I was at the Indy 500 a week before the race, and we inducted a couple of hundred young men and women into the service. And I want to be able to know when I look them in the eyes that I can keep my obligation to tell them you can serve our country, serve with dignity, have your dignity respected. And that's what we're trying to do. And General Odierno, you said we have a commander problem. And so my question is, you know, we ask a lot of our commanders. And in many cases, they're in the middle of fighting a war at the same time. They have a lot on their plate. And it doesn't, in my eyes, make them less capable that they don't handle this. They have other things to handle. I don't know, or why would a soldier think less of their commander simply because their commander doesn't handle this area?
Well, having been a commander in combat on 3 occasions,
right,
I would tell you that's essential, because they depend on you for everything that goes on in that unit. And one of the things we talked about, by the way, is this threat about retaliation. That's not going to change if you take it outside the chain of command. You still have the threat of retaliation. I want the commander fully involved in the decisions that have an impact on the morale and cohesion of the unit, to include punishment, to include UCMJ. That's their responsibility. It is not too much responsibility. In my mind, it sets the tone for the unit in order to then execute under the most strenuous conditions. And I need commanders who can do that. And I think ultimately, if they can't do it, then we hold them accountable. That's their responsibility. So I feel very strongly about it, because what we ask them to do is, I agree with you, what we ask them to do is very unique and very complex. And it requires a commander who sets the tone for every issue. And as we increase the role of women, it becomes even more important, in my mind, that the commanders take this on themselves and that they are part of the process to solve these problems. The other thing I would just say is they are not making these decisions independently. You have a very experienced judge advocate by your side the whole time, walking you through and helping you through this process.
And do they have, what is the training that they have, the commanders, as well, in terms of classes that they take or book learning that they take, that they can look at this and go, it's this or it's that, where they have the same kind of prosecutorial ability?
Yeah, we require commanders to go through legal orientation courses before they take command. That's part of the requirement before battalion command, brigade command, and when general officers take command, they are required to go through a course that we teach at the Judge Advocate General School in Charlottesville. And they go through that course to specifically outline for them what their responsibilities are. One of the key pieces of that is, if you don't understand the responsibility, you go to your Judge Advocate General for them to explain to you the details and technical responsibilities that you have. So it's not only do they get trained, they are taught to rely on their Judge Advocate Generals.
And this would be for any of the people. Are you aware of how often, and I'm sure you are, that people who have suffered this sexual assault, that not long after, there's often suicidal thoughts or suicidal problems? I mean, this seems to compound another issue that we deal with.
You're right.
Well,
You're right. You're right, Senator, it does. And that's why it gets to the overall issue of climate, environment, et cetera.
and I would like to ask our Coast Guard admirals who are here with us. There's a documentary, The Invisible War. There's a young lady in there who is a member of the Coast Guard. Stationed on Lake Michigan, not far from where I live. Went through an extraordinary and horrible series of events. And I was just wondering, you know, after having seen that, she's been working with the VA and working with others. Has the Coast Guard reached out to her? Have you contacted her or sat with her or talked to her to say, hey, how can we help put this back together for you?
Senator, we've made attempts to, some of the allegations she makes were not revealed when she was a member of the service. And every time we've made the offer to further investigate or take up those allegations, we've received no response. I watched that and it broke my heart. I brought it home and had my wife watch it to me. I know many of our spouses go on the road with us, and they are dealing with the families, they are dealing with the crews, and we have gone on we've made that mandatory viewing for our senior leaders, and we've also engaged in seminars every single leader, senior leader within the service. In fact, we're going to finish up with our headquarters component next week. And it is our intent that nothing like that happen again.
Okay, I guess the point I also want to make with this, and this is to all of you, and I know you're all committed to this as well, is that we continue to follow up. We continue to try to get it right for some of these folks who have felt, look, I've put forward my best claims, I've been put aside, or as this process goes through, that once a decision's made, that we don't just leave them to the side, that they are continuing to deal with a whole host of issues that we, like I said, when I looked at those kids at the Indy 500, the buck stops here too, and I have an obligation to make sure they get it right and have an awesome and wonderful career just like all of you have had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.